When news broke that footballing icon Pele had sadly passed away due to complications from, of course, his cancer treatment, it left football fans all over the world obviously devastated at the news. Before football was even a global phenomenon, a sport that everyone around the world enjoyed regardless of where they were from, Pele was in many ways arguably the first true global superstar of the game, someone who, even if you hadn't watched play in person, you knew exactly just how great he was. Now, obviously, when his news of his death broke, it left fans very, very sad. But the beauty of Pele, the player, was that he will remain immortalized in the memory of those who were, of course, lucky enough to see him, and even those who have viewed him only through the modern day lenses, be it of social media or things like YouTube, where his highlights or his best moments still live on in all of its glory. And of course, you have to remember that this was a man who, aside from transcending the sport and being a legendary figure, was also someone who did so merely because he was very, very, very good. In fact, many people would say arguably the best at what it is that he did, and that is, of course, playing football. But what would you consider, or what would we consider, some of the greatest moments of Pele's career? Now, obviously, the kind of career he had is very, very hard to pick out, but that's what we here at Sports Today have been trying to do, and we've come up with 5 moments that truly define or showcase just how special a player Pele was, is, and in many ways will be and will remain an inspiration to generations, even the ones that will come in the future. So, without further ado, let's check in and look at 5 really great moments, or 5 of the greatest moments from Pele's footballing career. Now, the first one, and bear in mind, this isn't a ranking as such, it's more looking at things in a chronological order, but one of the first things that comes to mind when you remember just how good this man was is that you have to recall the fact that when he signed for Santos, or when he signed the professional contract with Santos, he was only 15 years old. Yeah, you heard that right. 15 years old, and he was already considered good enough to be playing with the senior team. That's just how naturally talented and how mesmerizingly breathtaking his game was. So he made his Santos debut when he was just 15 years old and impressed so much for a club that were considered at the time and even today one of the best in Brazil, that he ended up getting called up to the Brazil team merely 2 years later when he was still only 17 years old. So it is quite frankly amazing, and it's something that will rarely if ever happen in today's day and age, considering just how structured football is around the world and how how teams will be careful to actually let players develop at a proper pace. But back in those days, the thinking was very simple, and they said that, look, if he's good enough, or in fact, in Pele's case, he was too good to be playing with boys of his age, you needed to be playing him with the grown-ups. So they let him play with the grown-ups, and he shone even then. All of that led to what I would consider the other number 2 on this particular list. Again, remember, no rankings, just chronology. Him getting called up to Brazil as a 17-year-old and winning the FIFA World Cup. Now, of course, it is worth noting that the FIFA World Cup back in 1958 was a very different beast to what it is now in 2022. In 58, you only had 16 teams playing the tournament, and the tournament was actually rebuilding itself in many ways, because you'd remember that in 1950, when the World Cup was hosted in Brazil, that was the first World Cup that had been hosted in 12 years, thanks to, of course, interruptions due to the World War, the Second World War. So the tournament needed a lot of rehabilitation, and it actually ended up getting a massive boost thanks to the appearance of this young man, Pele, as a 17-year-old in the 1958 edition of the tournament that was held in Sweden. Now, Brazil were a pretty strong side even without him, and that was evidenced by the fact that in the group stages, they were without Pele, and they still managed to comfortably top their group. But his addition just made them so much stronger and so much better. He scored in the quarterfinals, semis, and finals, and he ended up scoring a hat-trick in the final. He became the first player ever to score a hat-trick in the final, and he did so whilst only being a 17-year-old boy, giving Brazil the first of 3 World Cups that they would win in that 12-year period. And not just that, he would be winning them the first of 5 World Cups that Brazil have won overall, which is still, till this date, the record number of World Cup wins by any country. But even greater than this, even greater than 58, was arguably when he won it all the way back in 1970. That was his 3rd World Cup, and till date, by the way, Pele remains the only player to have won 3 separate World Cup titles, because he won one in 62 as well, and then in 1970. But 1970 is mainly remembered as his, magnus opus, if you have to look at it that way, and with good reason, because again, in 58, Brazil was strong even without him. They weren't centric or dependent on Pele. In 1970, however, Pele was very much at the peak of his powers. He was a top player. He was widely regarded as one of the best in the world rather than just, a young upstart. And he was seen as central to Brazil's hopes of winning the tournament after they had a very disappointing time in 1966, where they, of course, crashed out in the group stages of the tournament. So, in 1970, their preparation was top-notch, and it ended with them unsurprisingly winning it, and led to this very iconic picture where you can see Pele here being hoisted upon his teammates' shoulders, going all around the stadium, the Azteca Stadium in Mexico, and he was later given a sombrero as well to put on, which is a big Mexican hat. And this remains one of the iconic times, or one of the iconic images of that time. But it's mind-boggling just what an achievement it was. 3 times winning a World Cup was no mean feat, and this time around he was so central to them doing it because he played in all of the matches, not just in particular matches or not just in the knockouts. So this remains Pele's greatest moment, his crowning glory. But there were many other moments which came up as well, and we're going to talk about those in just a few. This is an image that is very, very interesting if you know the context behind it. It is, of course, the image that was taken when Pele scored what was considered at the time his 1,000th goal in all matches. Now, of course, this is a bit of a disputed thing because, as it turns out, historians went back in time and looked back at it, and this wasn't actually his 1,000th goal. Officially, his 1,000th goal had come a few days prior to that, but this is still considered his 1,000th goal because that's how it was celebrated at the time. And this image, by the way, was a very iconic image because when the match happened, it was happening at the Maracanã Stadium in Rio de Janeiro. It was a penalty. He stepped up, took the penalty, and the match just stopped after that because the achievement was considered so monumental and so massive that they just stopped the match. They actually ended up having like an impromptu press conference there. He was serenaded on everyone's shoulders, and he said something very, very powerful. He said that, when people asked him, who are you going to dedicate this goal to? He said that I dedicate this goal to the kids of Brazil. Why? Because I want them to look at me and realize that anything is possible in this world, and that they should, we need to be taking care of our kids. Now, that was a statement that was actually criticized at that point because people thought he was being political. But the simple fact of the matter is, if you look at the history of Brazil and you look at how many young kids, especially from the poorer areas, actually fall by the wayside or fall into lives of crime, you realize that his message was poignant and powerful even back then. And this remains just one of those surreal moments. And in fact, after this also, you had people cutting off the net. Pele himself cut off the net because he wanted the net from that particular match. It's just one of those very surreal moments that I doubt you would actually relive in today's day and age. It was just a different time altogether. And this this particular image of him hoisted up on people's shoulders, holding up the ball, just remains very, very iconic. But at number 5, and probably the final one on this particular list, but of course you can let us know which other ones were there, is this particular image. Now, of course, it's 2 images which I've put in split, and if you look at both of them, you'll realize that he's wearing 2 different kits. The picture on your left is him in a Santos jersey, and the picture of him on your right is one of him in a New York Cosmos jersey. Now, what if I told you that these 2 images were taken from the exact same match? You heard that right. That's not anything I'm making up. This picture was taken, or both of these pictures are from the exact same match, which was in fact his final retirement match, which saw Santos take on the New York Cosmos, who at that time were Pele's second club and the club that he played for in the USA. They faced off against each other in a friendly exhibition match, and Pele played one half for both of these teams. Now, in one half, he played for Santos. In the other, he played for Cosmos. He scored 1 goal in that match, and it's considered his final ever goal because he never really played any competitive or exhibition matches thereafter. Such was the brevity, or such was the powerfulness of this man, that 2 clubs ended up coming together, and 2 clubs with no relations whatsoever, because again, Santos was a club in Brazil, New York Cosmos was a club that was early and newly founded and in the USA. They came together, played this match just in honor of Pele, because that's what he meant to the sport, and that's what he meant to both of these clubs. It's a very powerful thing, and again, I really doubt you'd see too many clubs nowadays do that, considering the fact that a lot of clubs, especially players of Pele's stature, only play for 1 or 2 clubs, and those clubs, generally speaking, don't share such relations. But again, from a different time. This was something that happened, and it's very, very unique, and but also speaks to the respect that Pele commanded from fans around the world, that they arranged something so special for him to send him off into the sky. But perhaps the most beautiful moment from that match was that in the second half, it started raining in the match, which led to a very iconic headline from a Brazilian newspaper, where all that was written was, "Even the sky was crying." That was, of course, in reference to the fact that this would be Pele's last game, and indeed, it was his last official competitive game. He never really played much football thereafter, but such a powerful thing that you can have one man turn out for two different clubs in the same match. But that's what we think are his best, moments from his career. Of course, there's so many more. There's so many things that we could touch upon, and there's so many things which you might think were actually better than what it is that we picked out. But what do you guys think? Well, you can let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and tap the bell icon so you know when it is we're going live or uploading a new video. Then you can also go ahead and follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And last but not least, don't forget to download the AajTak app. Thank you all once again for joining us in this video. I hope to see you with us on Sports Today throughout the day. But for now, goodbye.